I never imagined my life would take such a turn. At 24, I was simply trying to survive, working long hours as a housekeeper to support my ailing mother and younger brother back in my village. When I was offered a live-in housekeeping position in the wealthy Zaman household, it felt like a blessing. A fresh start, better pay, a roof over my head. The mansion was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Marble floors that seemed to echo every step, crystal chandeliers that sparkled even at night, and a garden so perfectly manicured it looked unreal. But the real surprise wasn't the luxury. It was the people inside. Mrs. Karine Zaman was poised, elegant, and cold as stone. She barely acknowledged my presence beyond clipped instructions. Her routines were strict, and her smile rarely made it past formal social gatherings. She spent most of her days at charity events or spa appointments, leaving the house eerily quiet. And then there was Mr. Zaman. He wasn't just handsome, he was magnetic. There was something about the way he carried himself. Confident, collected, always calm. I was careful around him at first, always keeping my eyes low and my words few. But he noticed me in a way others didn't. He asked questions, not just about chores but about me. Where I was from, if I missed home, if I liked the job. I told myself he was just being kind. Weeks passed. I got used to the rhythm of the household, the silent dinners between husband and wife, the long hours I spent polishing silverware no one ever used. I observed more than I spoke, and what I saw was distance. Zayn and Karine lived like strangers in a palace. Polite, but disconnected. Two people sharing space, not a life. Still, I kept my distance. I was just the help. Invisible, replaceable. That's what I reminded myself whenever Zayn's gaze lingered a second too long, or when he thanked me for something Karine never even noticed. But sometimes, late at night when I was finishing the dishes or passing by his study, I'd hear music drifting through the door, or see him sitting alone with a book, lost in thought. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt drawn to that silence. I didn't understand it then. I didn't realize how dangerous quiet moments can be, how loneliness in a grand house can pull two strangers closer in ways words can't. I was just a housekeeper. Unnoticed. Unimportant. Until the night everything changed. The weeks turned into months, and my presence in the mansion shifted from invisible to noticed. I still wore the same plain uniform and followed the same routine, polishing silver, folding laundry, preparing afternoon tea, but there was a subtle change in the air. Especially whenever Mr. Zayn was around. He began spending more time at home. Meetings were now held in his study instead of the office, and late nights in the drawing room became more frequent. Sometimes he'd ask me to bring him tea, other times just sit quietly while I tidied up around him. It was in those quiet moments that the boundaries began to blur. One rainy afternoon, the storm outside had grounded Karine's flight. She was stranded out of town, and the house was oddly peaceful. Mr. Zayn was seated by the fireplace, sipping something warm. As I placed a tray of tea beside him, he gestured for me to sit, just for a moment. I hesitated, but curiosity won. We talked. Not as employer and employee, but as two people caught in the same stillness. He told me stories from his childhood, how his father was a harsh man, how he'd inherited the business young and married Karine out of expectation, not passion. She's not unkind, he said, staring into the fire. We just stopped choosing each other a long time ago. His words hung in the air like mist. I didn't know how to respond, but I nodded, understanding more than I let on. After all, loneliness wasn't a foreign concept to me. I had spent years tiptoeing around emotions I wasn't allowed to feel. From that day forward, things changed subtly. He began asking for my opinion on books, invited me to choose the wine for guests, even complimented the way I arranged flowers in the hallway. Each gesture was small, harmless on its own, but together, they built something fragile and dangerous. Karine remained absent, physically and emotionally. Their interactions were clipped and rehearsed, like two actors reciting lines from an old, forgotten play. And I became the silent witness to the unraveling threads of their marriage. But I was no longer just watching. I was part of the story. I began feeling seen, even valued. He noticed when I was tired. He'd ask if I'd eaten. His kindness was never inappropriate, but it crossed the line of what was professional. And slowly, without realizing it, I began to hope. For what I didn't know. I only knew the way he made me feel was unlike anything I'd ever known. Still, I reminded myself, this couldn't go anywhere. I was just a housekeeper. He was a married man. But hearts don't always obey logic. And that bond we pretended wasn't real. It was quietly growing stronger. Until the night it finally demanded to be acknowledged. The evening began like any other. The Zamans were hosting a charity dinner, and the mansion buzzed with activity. Lights shimmered, the kitchen was alive with clinking plates, and laughter echoed through the halls. I moved between rooms, unseen as always, straightening tablecloths, refilling glasses, adjusting candles. Kareen was radiant that night, dressed in an emerald gown, her arm linked loosely with Zane's. They looked perfect, but I had seen too much to believe the illusion. Behind the polished smiles and polite gestures was an ocean of distance. The guests left around midnight. Kareen, ever restless, announced she was leaving early the next morning for a weekend spa retreat with friends. She barely looked at Zane when she said goodbye, kissing the air beside his cheek before disappearing up the stairs. The house grew silent again. I stayed behind to clear the dining room. It was late, and I was tired, but Zane appeared in the doorway holding 2 glasses and a bottle of red wine. "You've done enough," he said softly. "Sit for a moment." I hesitated, but my feet betrayed me. I took the glass. We sat across from each other in the drawing room, the fire casting flickering shadows against the walls. The silence between us felt different, less heavy, more electric. He told me about his younger self, the dreams he had once held, the compromises he had made. I listened like always, but this time, something changed. "You make this house feel alive," he said suddenly. "Sometimes I forget what warmth feels like until you walk into the room." My heart skipped. I didn't know how to answer. My instincts screamed to walk away, but my body remained still. He leaned forward, not too close, just enough that the air shifted between us. His eyes searched mine, waiting for what, I wasn't sure. "I shouldn't be saying this," he murmured. "But I can't keep pretending." Something broke inside me. Maybe it was the months of silence, or the weight of being invisible for so long. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, not like I was a servant, but like I was someone. And in that moment, I forgot everything else. No words were spoken. Just the quiet rustle of clothes as we moved closer, the soft creak of the couch, the unspoken truth that we both crossed a line that could never be erased. There was no romance in it, only need. A need to be seen, to be held, to escape. Just for one night. When it ended, silence returned. Not the comforting silence we once shared, but the kind that fills every corner with guilt. He didn't look at me as I left the room. And I already knew I could never walk through that house the same way again. Morning came too quickly. I hadn't slept. The echo of what happened lingered in every breath I took, every step I made down the cold hallway. I returned to my duties as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Zane didn't appear for breakfast. I half expected him to leave a note or say something, anything, but there was nothing. Just the hollow clatter of plates as I set the table for one. Around noon, I heard the familiar sound of heels clicking against the marble. Kareen had returned, her spa weekend cut short due to a change in plans. Her suitcase trailed behind her as she walked in, as poised and unreadable as ever. She greeted me with her usual restrained nod and went straight to her room. I stood there, frozen. For the first time, I couldn't look her in the eyes. Later that day, I passed by Zane in the hallway. He didn't stop. No glance, no words, not even a flicker of the connection we'd shared just hours before. That hurt more than I expected. In a single night, I had gone from invisible to unforgettable and back to invisible again. I wanted to believe it had meant something, that I hadn't just been a distraction. But now, with silence replacing every stolen moment, I realized the truth. I was never part of his world. I had stepped into it by mistake, and now I had to leave. That evening, Corrine called me to the sunroom. I braced myself, heart racing. But she didn't know. Or if she did, she didn't show it. Instead, she smiled politely. You've been with us a while now, and I wanted to thank you. You've been dependable. I nodded, unsure of what to say. I recommended you to a friend of mine in the city, she continued. They're looking for a full-time live-in house manager. Better salary. A good opportunity. My throat tightened. Was this a gift? Or a dismissal? I think it's time, she said gently, her gaze lingering on me. For both of us. And just like that, my exit was written. I packed that night, folding every memory into silence. I left the mansion before dawn, without a goodbye from him. Maybe he thought it was best. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Or maybe I was never anything more than a fleeting mistake. I don't hate him. I don't hate her. If anything, I pity the emptiness that lived in that house long before I arrived. I was just a housekeeper, someone no one noticed. But for one night, I was something more. And that one night cost me my place, my peace, and the version of myself I could never return to. Some betrayals don't begin with lies. They begin with silence and end the moment you break it.